It's so cool.
It is so
Love
cool.
that reflection.
It is so cool.
And even, I'm sorry, the very last spirit to be swallowed up is death. In Revelations in life, and Jesus is the way that so he's going to go up, and death will be no more forever.
So good. Thank you, Dustin. Is it interesting to be in a space, just I want to ask you, where there is a range and multiple lanes to land in regarding this? Where you are encouraged to have the conversation with God, what does this really mean? Like there's just a few places where we're going, okay, here's a grounding point. Here's some grounding points. But other than that, this is really about having a conversation with God. What does this mean? Because that's the whole point of Scripture, is to open up the conversation of intimacy with God, not to be a manual on how to live. If you start to have Scripture be a manual on how to live, everything becomes based on performance, not based on relationship. So as we continue in this, I think it's going to be so fun. I was waiting for kids to come in, but we're going to turn over to Jared and Lindsay here in just a moment. Is that what has started to unfold are those questions of evil roaming in the earth, God's response to that, and the part that humanity plays. So we will actually get through all of 2 next week, which opens up one of the best cosmic conversations I've ever seen. And it was a real key, I think, for you and I in understanding like what was happening with all the stuff in our family. So when things would go south in our relationship, when things would go south in our parenting, when things would go south in our relationship between us, it was actually some of the revelation from this section of Job that started to help us to understand what's really going on behind the scenes. So we'll see if it affects you the same way. Super, super fun. Yay! I love it. I love it. And so now we're going to welcome up, I'm just kidding, sorry, I'm just listening for a second with the Lord. Why don't you guys come on up? Yeah, I'm going to just encourage you to spend some time in this space and allow yourself to grapple with the injustice that has just occurred, and the injustice and the question. And I love, C.S. Lewis says, the most horrible thing in all of eternity would be to die and to meet God and discover that He's not really good. And this starts to unwrap. And if this doesn't make you uncomfortable with who God really is, then you probably haven't allowed yourself to really think it through. Because this is uncomfortable. And Job states it rightly. He says, God was responsible for this. And in that, he was not wrong. So it's a big issue, and it's a big question, which many people have then landed on, God brings evil, and that's a separate question. So, yay! Okay. So Lindsay and Jared do our last part of our time together, where we practice hearing God, because the most important part, I think, of living a life with God is knowing what He's doing. What are you doing in our marriage? What are you doing in our life? What are you doing with kids? What are you doing in my job? What are you doing with our finances? What's going on? How can I live this life not for you, but how can I live this life with you? So we practice every week hearing God, and we practice with each other. We practice hearing each other, because I discovered that hearing God is kind of like a talent. It's like a skill. And the first time you go play soccer, like you're usually not a soccer prodigy, except for maybe Taylor, maybe Eli. But for the rest of us, you have to practice. And so hearing God is about practicing and starting to learn the fragrance of Him, and learning how to hear Him for yourself and for other people. So I love that you guys adventure in this. You have been passionately committed to this for years, and we're really honored to have you do this with us. So I'm going to turn off my mic here and let you take it away with